What's going on?
Oh,
It's
it
not
was
bad weather here.
thunderstorms and torrential rain. Like there were just basically no flights into JFK, LaGuardia, or Newark either yesterday afternoon or this morning. It was just a disaster.
Wow. Sorry to hear it. Well, we would have liked to have had you here, so sorry to hear it.
Okay, let me make sure I post this. I don't think I posted it on the channel. Let me find the chat. Oh, I did post it on the channel, but for those that are
It doesn't
just
hurt to
joining,
repost.
yeah, it's kind of silly. It doesn't keep the chat. Okay, well, let's go ahead and get started. I know people will probably trickle in. Please, if you can, put your name up top. And if you want to share something about yourself, feel free. I think there's some new faces. Oh, I should put that always. Newcomers.
Yes.
Yes. Are there any newcomers to the meeting today? I think there's one. Hi.
Hey everyone, I'm new. Dave Lester. I recently joined Google on the open source team. Happy to meet you and glad to be part of the community.
Okay, thanks for joining. Okay, you haven't missed much. This is our third meeting, so good timing.
Dave, did I capture the spelling correctly? Lester?
Yeah.
That is correct. Thanks.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Welcome.
Okay. And thank you, David, for helping me take notes. Appreciate that.
Happy to. Many hands make light work.
Yes, yes. Yeah, and I let's see, failed to reach the oh, that's why you know about that. I was wondering how you knew there was no flights in or out of the East Coast. Well, I'm sorry to hear that. But hopefully you can get to the East Coast at some point, maybe in the next day or two.
It was, I mean, it's a long story. I'll not bore you with it. And the rebooking process was such that there were just nothing to get on. So next week is my plan B. We will see.
Okay. Well, crossing fingers for you. Multiple fingers.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Okay. So Isaac, last time we met, which was the first meeting, you said you wanted to present on attestation. I know you were on vacation last time. So are you able to present on attestation?
Yeah. Let me just share my screen here.
Yep, let me stop sharing. There we go.
Okay. Can you see this deck here? And can you see it now at full screen if I do this? Oh, you can.
Yes, I can see the appendix.
Yeah, perfect. So this is actually where the content is. So this is an appendix to a different deck. But I'll give you, and I'm just going to take a few minutes here to go through this. This is one of the exercises that I did, I don't know, a few months back. I was getting a lot of questions about, hey, how does SLSA relate to SSDF? How does SLSA relate to Skit? How does Skit relate to SigStore? How do all these pieces fit together? And so I took a little bit of time to go back to first principles and assembled some thoughts, which seemed sufficiently compelling that I put them into a deck and shared them around here at Google, and folks here found them useful. And so I thought it might be a useful framing for this meeting as well. That there's no action that comes from this, rather than just kind of sharing the content of my head and how I've begun to at least kind of create a mental model of this space. So I started off with this, the notion of software attestation has some key elements, and these aren't all the elements. There's one that's missing here, which I'll come to at the end, and I'll come back to. But I started off, there's a neat thing coming out of Trillion called the claimant model. There's a link here, and I'll share these slides afterwards as well, so folks have the links. But about entities making claims about artifacts and arbiters of those entities, and so on. And so that was a useful framing here, but thinking about software attestation in general, I'll go through each of these individually. And so there's a set of possible claims you might want to make about a software artifact. And so, SLSA, enables you to make claims like, hey, it was built from these materials, it was built hermetically, the source of this binary is right here. You can imagine, if we extend SLSA into other areas of concern, we might want to enable, attestations like this artifact was scanned for vulnerabilities on this date, or the source management practices upstream of this artifact are X, Y, Z, or this artifact this artifact has this SBOM or whatever it is. And so you can think about a set of possible claims you might want to make, and then how these claims get grouped. And so there's functional groupings of claims and there's tiered groupings, are kind of what I came up with. And SLSA offers both. And so SLSA has 4 functional groupings of claims are in common, source management, build, and provenance. But then it also offers tiers, SLSA 1, 2, 3, and 4. So you can group software attestations or claims about artifacts into, in a variety of different ways. And then you come on to, well, which entities will want to make claims? And so, the author or maintainer of a project may want to say, hey, I claim that the following practices were in use around how this project was governed, or source management. The builder or distributor of the product or artifact may want to make claims about how it was built. And then there may be a need for a third-party assessor, and so it may be that Sneak or SIF want to come in and say, well, we've done an analysis of this artifact, and on this date, here's our assessment of its contents or its status with respect to known vulnerabilities. A third-party assessor could also be a package manager. And so for a given open source package that's built over here and then uploaded to PyPy, say, it could be that PyPy wants to then do some assessment around the integrity or security of that package, and then put its own stamp of PyPy, I believe that this artifact conforms to X, Y, or Z standard. So there's a variety of different entities in the supply chain that may want to make claims about an artifact. Having gotten these claims, you're going to then need a way of formatting them, signing them, and this is where we get into a little bit of detail. And we have in toto or DISI, we have CBOR and COSI. These are familiar to many folks here. And some of these claims have explicit or implicit semantics. And so, software signatures like Authenticode back in the day, simply the act of signing, there isn't an explicit claim there, but there's an implicit claim that, hey, the publisher signed this artifact, therefore they are testifying about its provenance and its integrity. Hey, I, Microsoft, signed this artifact, therefore you can trust that it came from me and it hasn't been tampered with since. But those claims are implicit in just the presence of the signature. With these claims then, in order to make them useful, we need a way of registering, discovering, and authenticating them. There are a variety of ways of doing this. And again, in the swirling landscape around SLSA and SCIT and SSDF and so on, and the Authenticode come to that. There's these concepts like transparency logs, sidecars for artifacts, naming conventions, being able to link an artifact to a signed provenance statement that's distributed alongside of it, and so on, or even embedded signatures. And then where the rubber meets the road here is, the reason why we're doing this ultimately is the ability to actually specify policy based in claims, but not just in the claims. It's trust in those making them as well. And so you can think of a claim here as, having, yes, there's the entity making the claim, there's the claim itself, there's the artifact to which the claim pertains. And there's a dimension again, which is a part of the policy assessment, which is to what extent do I trust the entity making the claim, and what types of claims do I trust that entity to make? And so, SLSA has right now an implicit trust around some of the tooling we've built around GitHub Actions, that we trust GitHub when they say, our GitHub Actions pipeline is designed such that, the environment's isolated and hermetic, and you can reproduce builds securely using this environment. And so we allow the GitHub Actions builder to say this artifact was built in conformance with SLSA level 3. Why do we do that? We do that because we have some implicit trust in GitHub. But as SLSA becomes more prevalent, and as frameworks like SLSA expand their reach, I think we're going to need to get a little bit more explicit about how that trust is formulated and how it's anchored. And it could be that organization X trusts GitHub to certify an artifact at SLSA level 3. Organization Y may not. organization Y may trust a smaller or different set of builders. And so I think, SLSA has very little in this realm today around, how trust is. How trust is established around claims around SLSA provenance, and then the anchors of that trust. Anyway, where this ends up is, looking at this table here and actually making this explicit with a number of different frameworks. And so SLSA here, this first column, the set of possible claims, SLSA calls requirements. It groups them into, both functional groupings and tiered groupings, forming a matrix. The entities making the claims today, we allow the builder to make a claim. I built this artifact. I am a builder that provides the right environment that conforms with SLSA principles. Therefore, you should believe my claims about this artifact. The formatting and signing, again, getting into the details, but these are shoulds in the SLSA specification. Should is around, encoding your statement. There's an in-toto statement, formatted in JSON, signed with DISTI. But this isn't the only way this also can be done. These are shoulds rather than musts. And then as we go further down the column here, how we get to registration, discovery, authentication gets a little bit more blurry. SIGSTOR has a role to play there, I believe. And then policy, as you probably all know, is a work in progress, how we actually express and define policy around SLSA. What's interesting, looking at the next two columns, actually, let's skip forward to SCIT. I think, my understanding of SCIT, having been in the SCIT working groups and having talked to folks about SCIT, it seems to me that actually SCIT and SLSA seem rather complementary in the sense that SCIT is silent on essentially the top 3 rows of this table. SCIT doesn't say, we're only supporting this set of claims, or, this set of claims is out of scope. With SCIT, you can essentially make an arbitrary claim about an arbitrary artifact. Whereas SCIT becomes very detailed around how those claims are signed. The draft specification at the moment has musts around CBOR and COSI and so on. Around registration, discovery, and authentication, it gets very specific about transparency service. All the policy is out of scope. But looking at this, the elements where SLSA is less prescriptive around formatting and signing, about registration, discovery, are precisely the areas where SCIT is highly prescriptive, and vice versa. And so you could imagine, I think, a world in which SLSA attestations and SLSA provenance are expressed and distributed and stored and registered in a SCIT-like framework. SSDF here is an interesting middle ground. SSDF has a functional grouping called practices around a set of tasks. The entity making the claim is essentially the supplier, who at this stage is looking to self-attest around SSDF conformance. And then the policy is kind of implicit, that there isn't a policy engine there, but the implicit policy is that, hey, at some point the federal government will not buy or deploy your stuff if you're not SSDF compliant. And so in conformance with this executive order, there's the implicit policy that in order to ship your stuff into the federal government, you're going to need to be SSDF conformant. And then just kind of on the right-hand side here is slightly different way of doing software attestations, but one which is more ancient and familiar around Authenticode, where here we're in the world of implicit attestations. Just by signing an artifact, you're saying certain things about it. You're talking about the publisher identity and the integrity of the artifact. There's entire ways of how you distribute those signatures. The publisher of the artifact is making the claim. Registration of the signatures, you can either embed the signature in the binary or super alongside a sidecar. The CA is always hosted, and so on. And so Authenticode is a different mechanism, very different mechanism for doing this stuff. But essentially, performs a similar set of functions. That it is essentially a mechanism for non-forgeable statements about a digital artifact. There's one row on this table which I think keeps coming up with people say, oh, what about this? And that is identity. And I do think that there's an identity row on this table which is missing, that when we're looking at who is the entity, how do we identify the entity making the claim? SLSA, to the extent that we're reliant on SIGSTOR for signing provenance attestations. We're essentially leveraging OIDC and SIGSTOR exchanging OIDC tokens for short-lived certificates. Whereas in Skitland, I think the leading proposal in Skitland is to use DID for identity, and so I think there is an important identity row on this table which isn't here today. So I wanted to kind of lay that out, and that's, as I said, this isn't maybe particularly actionable, but I found it useful to think through in this way and see how SIGSTOR can be seen to support SLSA around particular functions of software attestation. I think it's interesting to see how SLSA and SCIT at a squint are rather complementary. I think it's also interesting to see how SSDF and SCIT are actually highly complementary in the precise parts of this framework which are out of scope for SSDF. SCIT comes in with a highly prescriptive framework. So I'm going to pause there anyway, and as I say, I'll share these slides. But I thought as we think to position SLSA, as we think about how SLSA may evolve, as we think about the missing pieces of SLSA, like policy and like discovery, for example, we have a fairly weak story today. I thought this framework was useful.
Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah. So this couple of comments and a couple of questions. So I think this lines up with some of our research on the same sort of thing. SCIT is sort of this broader framework for how to distribute claims, how to actually like make claims in general. SLSA is sort of a set of specific claims. And there's some work being done even in conjunction with some of us, in conjunction with Google on like a thing called Guac, which is also trying to do some of that registration discovery piece as well. Right now, it does seem like the majority, there's the policy stuff. There is existing work out in the community around enforcing SLSA-based policies or policies based around SLSA, but it's mostly from a admission control perspective into Kubernetes. There is some discussion on like, how do we make that more generic so that like not just talking about specifically like, oh, here's an admission controller, here's policy that makes sure that, whatever. But I know folks are saying, hey, how do we do the same sort of thing, but for like more generically, like, hey, if I want to ingest a thing, I want to make sure it's SLSA. And whether that ingestion is running it in production or downloading it to a dev machine, that should be something that is kind of considered at that level. I guess the only question I have, or this is some folks are also starting to ask if there are ways to describe the categories that these things fit in, so that as more of this comes out, we have a unified vocabulary for how to describe.
Like, oh, SLSA is an attestation framework, and SCIT is a claim discovery network, and so they're completely that kind of way.
Yeah, because a lot of folks are asking like, oh, cool, I have these things made in SLSA. Great. But then how does that relate to SCIT and building up the sort of like building up that vocabulary, I think would be interesting. I know actually there was somebody in just real quickly in OpenSSF chat yesterday, I believe it was Zach Newman, who posted in general chat saying like, hey, is there a terminology to consistently between working groups, for instance, a shared glossary, terms like attestation, artifact, etc. I think that sort of thing might be useful. And I know there's a million working groups already, or sorry, not just working group, you know what I mean? But just wanted to throw that out there.
No, I love the idea of a glossary. I mean, we started an exercise internally at Google where everyone was saying, well, what is an artifact and what is a project and how do we think about a library? Or actually, no, it started with what does the word dependency mean? And this turned into a 5-page document basically. But I agree. I mean, and I think that something like the positioning working group actually getting crisp on the terms we use is probably a big part of making it successful. Melba, sorry, you have your hand up.
This But before I ask my question, Mike, I'm definitely in sync with you in terms of that taxonomy. Even just for simple things, in the spec meeting, I said, a runner, but IBM calls it a worker, GitLab, GitHub calls it a runner, Microsoft Azure calls it a pipeline agent, right? So I think that, mapping of just a simple term that everybody's talking about, but then nobody understands, I think you're spot on. But my question was two questions, and I put it on the meeting notes. I love the framework comparison you have, right? Instead of it being detailed, it's very much simple to the point. Do you have a blog on this, or can we publish a blog on this? I think it would be very helpful to the community to have something like this just being present.
I'm happy to take the action of drafting this into a post and making a start that other folks can contribute to. This has been sitting with me for a little bit, and it's been helpful enough for me. I think that I did want to turn into something, and so the deck was a start of me kind of just sharing the ideas. But you're right. I think a write-up of this would be useful, and I can take that action.
Okay, and then you mentioned Salsa and Skit are complementary. One of the frameworks, which was Skit, if you can call it a framework, we said that we would compare it to Salsa, detailed, right?
Mm-hmm.
But given that you are familiar with Skit and Salsa, I was also thinking, well, what if we had a blog about a super supply chain, right? With Salsa and Skit, right? And maybe SIGSTOR, I know you mentioned SIGSTOR.
Salsa and Skit and SSPF, and all the S's together in one place, the Salsa, the Skit, the SSPF, the scorecard, everything. And actually, I mean, you're right. I mean, this literally started from, folks internally here at Google kind of, hitting me up and saying, I need to understand the difference between Salsa and Skit, and then kind of tearing them apart. It turns out they're different things. And to Mike's point, like, actually they exist in different categories. To try and compare them is a category error because they're different things fundamentally. And that was kind of the epiphany that I came out of putting this deck together with. I could certainly include that in the blog post too. Okay.
It could be a separate one too, but we can, I guess, brainstorm offline on that, but I do have it as an action item because I think that would be a good start, right? You already have something in place. It would be a good first objective or first deliverable, so to speak, for the group.
Happy to take that on.
I don't know who is next. I guess, David, you have your hand up.
I do. So first of all, +1 on turning this into a blog post, or multiple blog posts. Love it, because that would be, I found this interesting, but I think other people would who aren't at this particular meeting, and I think that would be great. As far as glossaries go, let's see. I think it's certainly important to define your terms. At least within a document, if you say a word and people might misunderstand, highly important. There's definitely value in trying to create say a cross-org glossary, but I will just quickly observe that having been involved in similar efforts in the past, those take a whole lot longer than you might expect. So I would suggest start small, maybe starting within a document with a few terms, trying to make those crisp, and then saying, hey, let's pull out this part and then grow it. Just because otherwise, it's okay if you think that's the important thing, go for it. It's just, it takes real time. That's all. I just want to warn before starting. The road is long.
Agreed. Yeah, I'm doing one for the diagrams I made for the specification. Like I said, different people call the thing that does the same function different. They name it, different things, and it drives me nuts because I say one thing and nobody understands what I'm saying on the other side. So, but I agree with you. Start small. Now, Mike, did you have something that's already a taxonomy? I thought you said that somebody brought this up, but I don't
No,
see.
this was in general chat in OpenSSF. I don't have a taxonomy. I do think that there should be a taxonomy. In the past, Ava from Microsoft, they had created at least a start, and this is their GitHub that with some of that work in there.
Okay, let me see. Okay, I'll put it in the meeting notes. And then I guess we can take a look at it. Okay. Any other questions for Isaac? Or Isaac, do you have any other comments?
I don't. Thank you for having time for me on the agenda. I'm glad this was at least a little bit useful. And yes, I will start on a write-up.
Yeah, awesome. And let's see, share. Let's go back. Okay, so next on the agenda, I have the charter template, which I thought would just be one paragraph, and leave it to me to make it a whole page, maybe two. I found this outline on what a charter means and what are the components of a charter. And so based off of the feedback that we had the last meeting, which were split up between two issues, it was a scope charter issue and then, you know, comparing those different frameworks. I kind of put it in this document and tried to make sense of some of the discussions so that it fits these areas. There's the mission, right? And this is the definition of what a mission is. Why do we exist? What activities will we pursue, etc. Right? And so I started writing, you know, educate, evangelize, and I was like, okay, let me keep going with the E's. So educate, evangelize, evaluate, and encourage. So that was kind of the mission. I think this one is a new one that we didn't talk about. Basically, you know, try to get the more people, the better, right? Especially when you're talking about different industries, you know, open source communities or government, you know, different geographies. Their perspectives are very unique, and we need to take that into consideration when it comes to SLSA. And then the vision, I didn't really change it much. I just, you know, kind of reworded it a little from what Josh's document stated. And then the values is just a copy and paste of our code of conduct at the beginning. So there's no change there. And then the strategy is when I start kind of going into like, what are we doing when we evaluate? And these were the things that came up out of the last meeting, right? Like, how does it overlap? Does it increase scope? Is there, you know, deficiencies with relations to other frameworks, et cetera? You know, educating, when we're educating people, what are we trying to do, right? How SLSA compares to other frameworks, you know, how to apply it, you know, what is out of scope for SLSA, you know, just like you mentioned, Isaac, you know, you're comparing Skit to SLSA. Somebody says, oh, I want to do what Skit's doing. Well, that's not quite what SLSA is doing, right? Trying to educate the industry or organizations, you know, this is not what SLSA is for. And educating standards and regulatory bodies. So if we think of NIST as an example, I know Brandon Lum had mentioned he had connections at NIST to potentially help them understand how SLSA fits in, right? And then potentially have, you know, our material or reference SLSA in their material so that others can also reference it. So I think that's a good way of thinking of educating the regulatory bodies. And then just educating the general open source community, right? We can either do it, you know, with the work or the communities we're involved in already, or via an initiative like, I know there's a working group for critical software. I know there's another one for, I think, best practices that goes out and tries to help people from a security perspective. So anything we can do there and trying to help SLSA and getting people to leverage SLSA, I think is, you know, advantageous to the entire industry, not just us. And I don't know if we need this, but I figured this is just giving people ideas how they would do this, right? Blogs, Slack channels. That's where my social media account question came from, Mike. I was trying to figure out, well, do we have a social media account for SLSA? I don't, and I think other than Slack, I didn't see one. And so I don't know if that's in our charter going forward, but if we do have one, obviously we would add it here.
I'll
Go ahead.
quickly, OpenSSF absolutely does, and
Okay.
SLSA is an OpenSSF project. So, I mean,
Okay.
there's some rules, but absolutely you can use, I suspect you won't be using so much the LF wide ones, but that is certainly a possibility.
Okay.
So, yeah. So, I mean, we've got, we can do such things. So leave that in. We can do
Yeah.
things.
So yeah, I'm going to highlight this because I don't have a link to that contribution guideline. If I can zoom out and find my little highlighter here. Okay. It was up here. Evaluate. There, see contribution guidelines. There we go. I didn't finish the evangelize. I did finish encourage, but not the evangelize, because evangelize is very similar to educate. But evangelize is obviously a different mission, right? It's literally going out and saying how great SLSA is, and it's going to solve X, Y, Z of your problems. It's not necessarily the same thing as educating. So I would like some help on this part, if it makes sense to keep evangelize. Otherwise, we can just keep it as, educate and get rid of the evangelize. And then encourage. This is just, getting those different perspectives, and, by encouraging new participation, right? What are we gaining, right? We get new use cases, new personas, right? Opportunities for, I should say, SLSA expansion, for shifting the SLSA strategy scope, right? If something doesn't make sense to do anymore in SLSA, then we will get that perspective as more people join and more people use SLSA. And then indirectly, we're enabling additional OpenSSF participation and potentially improving security of our open source communities. And operating goals, this is similar to what Josh put in his document. He originally put, SSDF and SBOM, but I kind of put EO and CNCF. I know a lot of people are very much keen on those two things as well. So if the group agrees on these as short-term goals, then great. If not, feel free to comment on what should be the short-term goals. And then longer term is, look at other NIST documents. Oh, this one has EO, but I'll figure out if I'm going to keep EO in here or not. The CISA common criteria. And one thing I forgot to put was the CIS benchmark for supply chain security. I know that was a big one that just got released. And then, as we go through these exercises, we're going to provide feedback to the SLSA specification. And I didn't put anything in leadership and accountability. So thoughts, questions, the link is on there. I know I had it private by accident earlier, so I did fix the link. Not sure. Thoughts? Oh, go ahead, Mike.
Oh yeah, no. This is great, and I think also like some of this might even be useful to as we kind of push SLSA to 1.0, maybe even make this potentially like integrated just into the general SLSA charter.
Mm-hmm.
A couple of things. One is I think also there's some additional work that's spinning up from the CD Foundation there, and once again another Linux Foundation group. Actually, so for a while there, it was a little unclear where they're going to be focused, and they're going to actually be really focused on the problem from the business challenge side, as opposed to so much the technical challenge side. So this is the stuff around things like, hey, imagine, there's a supply chain security risk. Like, what does that mean from a legal, what does that mean from like a licensing standpoint? What does that mean from, a time to market standpoint, and yada, yada. So that's just something just to, being there, because they seem to be interested to see how they could, also look at like taking things that are maybe a bit more businessy, like sorts of things. Like you can imagine,
like enterprise.
like a product manager attests to a thing saying, yep, this should be good to go to production, right? Like I think the features look good for us to make a release. And it's the sort of thing that you might imagine is like would be part of a holistic decision for a a large organization, often like a commercial enterprise, making a decision based on ingesting of software or whatever, as opposed to just purely the security focus, which is what we're focused on.
Okay. Okay.
So
do you think that's a long-term goal?
yeah, that's definitely a longer term goal, because they've just started spinning that up. They're still looking for like use cases and like personas and that kind of thing.
Okay. Okay. Well, that's good to know.
Yeah.
Any...
So, oh, the only other thing was also you can sign me up for whatever the CNCF one is, because I've been leading a lot of that for the CNCF. So if you need anybody to link up with.
Yeah, the CNCF, I think it's starting to fill out this this column here on this spreadsheet that we have, right, where we started with Brandon and some other SLSA members of, okay, what controls, which I know are somewhat changing in SLSA, but what controls in SLSA or requirements in SLSA meet some of these controls in these frameworks. So I think that's the biggest help that we need right now for CNCF, is just trying to do that comparison.
Yeah, so let me actually, Marina Moore has essentially done that.
Okay.
So let me go and see if I can find what she made. Which, to be clear, Marina Moore, like as on behalf of the CNCF, had made that already, or at least had started some of that mapping already. So I'm sure we could just sort of merge all of these into one. Okay. I'm going to look up the link and then I'll post it in chat. Post it in the meeting notes.
Yeah, I just put the link in the meeting notes, and I'm trying to find the chat to WebEx because it always disappears whenever the presentation stops. So there's the spreadsheet. But yeah, any contributions to this or any other framework that's either listed on here or not listed, please, this is kind of what we're going to be doing, is comparing, right? How does it match up? And then we'll probably have some sort of blog or summary of some sort to educate the community on what our findings are. If I go back, nope. There it goes. Okay. Any other comments or questions on this? I honestly thought it would just be one paragraph, and I made the mistake of looking up charter. And then I came across this LinkedIn article. I'm like, oh, that's really good. So I think what I'll do is I'll put in a PR to adopt some of this, given that people give them each section a thumbs up. Go ahead.
I do have a minor nit. You copied and pasted the code of conduct. Can you just link to it? Because otherwise,
I did.
Yeah.
Yeah. Where did it go?
Strategy. Would you mind also dropping the link that you put in the notes to Charter Template is the published version rather than the one you're working on? Would you mind dropping a link to
you see, I don't know how to...
version so we can comment?
Yeah. Yeah. That's I was trying to make it public, and I thought publish meant publish it to the public. That's my not
what you
knowing
want to
how
share.
to use Google Docs. Share.
Yep. On the
yeah,
top
I did
right.
Publish.
No. Yeah. Oh, okay. Oh. That works too. Okay. Yes, it does.
Oh, got it. Anyone with the link. Okay.
That's the one. Yeah.
There you go.
Okay.
Hang on. Before you do that, Mel, because that made everyone a viewer. Would you mind making everyone a commenter?
Oh, sorry. See, I'm not paying attention. View. Oh. Okay.
Yeah, make them a commenter, and that way they can suggest changes but not make them.
Okay.
Yeah.
There you go. And
okay,
click on done.
You.
Well, you'll have to click on
I'm-
done or
I've
nothing
gotten
else
it.
will happen.
Next thing you know, I'm just
You're-
going to
you're-
close out the tab.
Yeah, don't worry. You wouldn't be the first nor last. Yeah. So specifically on the code of conduct, I mean, there's always a risk of stuff changing, and so
Yes.
for I would suggest just link to the other, and you know, I mean, most
Just
people
get rid
link
of
to other.
this.
Right, exactly. Just link
Okay.
to it. You're done. If there's an
Okay.
update, you're done.
Okay. Okay. That works for
And it's
me.
also now it's slightly shorter.
Yes. Yes. That works for me. Okay. Any other comments or questions about the charter? No. Okay. So I'm hoping to get this done. When do people think, or how long should I give people to review each of these, give it a thumbs up with the exception of the ones that aren't finished? I don't want to wait 2 weeks necessarily because I've already waited 2 weeks to actually finish this. So if we can get maybe a week for people.
I would say maybe a week, and then in a week's time ping the channel and just give people that final nudge, and then aim to bring a kind of a proposed final to this meeting in 2 weeks.
Okay.
Yeah, and if I would suggest both the Slack channel and the mailing list. Hey,
Yeah,
here's
good call.
the link. Everybody can look. Include the URL, and basically point everybody to it and say, hey, can we wrap this up by date X? At least the
Review.
first
Okay.
draft. I mean, all these things, they're always subject to change, but
Yeah. 1 week and then follow up. Email, Slack. Okay, I put that, and I'm gonna highlight it so that I remember later. I'll fix it in the notes. Okay, and if anybody wants to help with this leadership accountability, or what was the other one? I think it was evangelize. Whether or not we should keep it or get rid of it, please feel free to comment or jump in and trying to fill in the gaps. Okay, and then the other thing I have on the agenda is, because I'm not seeing a lot of outside of activity with regards to this, like for example, like the comparison. We said we would start comparing, and even myself, I'm guilty of that. Haven't started the comparison. So I'm wondering if we should have a bi-weekly working session so that if we have to get something done like this, right, we have the bi-week and we have the time set aside to let's just hash it out. Let's finish it, or let's write a blog, or let's do a comparison. That way we're not waiting 2 weeks and then find out no one's done anything. So not sure what people's thoughts are on that.
I like it. I mean, I think, part of the original intent of setting up these SIGs, the specification and positioning and tooling SIGs was precisely that, to actually kind of do, try and converge on specific outcomes. The community meeting provided a great venue for discussion, but not a lot of action. And so I think having these SIGs biased towards action and having specific working sessions where we're actually creating stuff, I think sounds like a great idea to me.
Yeah, I'll give a good +1 to that too. I mean, a lot of the things that we talk about are very strategic in nature. It'd be good to have a good tactical meeting where things actually get accomplished and done.
Yeah. Thank you, Jay. Anyone else? Yay or nay?
Yeah.
I'm not going to judge you either way. Okay. Okay, 1 +1 from Mike. Okay. Anyone else?
This is Jason. So kind of like comparing this to another working group on a completely different framework. Yeah, the way I've seen it done is like typically if they're engaging on a mapping from one framework to another, the different domains are split up. There's usually an initial person that compares the two frameworks, and then a second reviewer. And then if there's any like ties or disagreements, a third reviewer. But on blogs, yeah, it seems like we could team up and divvy those out based on who wants to contribute to which blogs and so on.
Okay. And then, so you said the blog is really more of a working session?
I don't know.
Or
I
is
think
it separate? Like just like the comparisons?
I think it would be separate. And when we're saying comparisons, we mean mappings for the
Yes,
frameworks?
mappings. Yeah,
Okay.
sorry.
Yeah, I would handle those differently. I think it's just in my opinion,
Yeah.
from what I've seen from other working groups, like, yeah, breaking up the different control objectives of the two frameworks, we can divvy those up into kind of like a few areas, but blogs, maybe something where people volunteer for certain subjects, and then it's 2 or 3 people or so on.
Okay,
But
that's
just a
fair.
suggestion.
Yep. Anyone else have comments? No? Okay, well, I think I can do the same time. I know I did it on a bi-week, so it wouldn't conflict with any other, OpenSSF meetings. I don't know if there's another OpenSSF meeting the same time next week. Looking for the calendar. SSF. Somebody gets to it before me, by all means, let me know. And then I guess I'm gonna have to email OpenSSF operations team, is that right? To get it on the calendar for recurring sessions? I think so.
I think that's right.
Yeah, okay. Okay, so then action item, get on OpenSSF meeting calendar. Okay. Any other topics people want to discuss? And I am losing my, is it this one? Yes. Any other topics?
So just as an FYI, I added Marina's spreadsheet there, as well as the CNCF control catalog.
Oh, okay. That's a good one.
Yeah, so the CNCF control catalog, there's the subset that's the supply chain security best practices is what's relevant to us. But yeah, there's actually not a ton of, like a lot of the stuff under the CNCFs, things fall more under that sort of like holistic, like, here is what you should be doing from a build, deploy, etc. Like, yes, you should be doing SCA, you should be doing all these other things, whereas SLSA, at least right now, and I know there's a bunch of discussions up on increasing the scope, has really been focused on the provenance piece, whereas the securing the supply chain security from the CNCF is significantly more focused on stuff like actual actions. It's very prescriptive. Like, you should be doing these very specific things.
Okay. Yeah, sorry. I'm trying to like expand the column and it's not letting me. So it's driving me a little crazy because I can't.
Oh,
see all
yeah,
of
because
it.
I think it's technically under comment only.
Got it.
So
Okay.
like maybe you might have to make a copy. I'm
Okay. Yeah, maybe. Okay. Yeah. Securing the source, securing build pipelines, artifacts.
Yeah, these controls, these things are also
Okay.
all under the I'm just gonna post, whoops. It's all the way at the bottom of that PDF are all this, or wait, where?
Okay.
It used to be under here. They might have swapped it out. Oh,
Okay.
yeah, they changed the I think the formatting a little bit. So there is it's in one of these things. I'll update the
Okay. The link in the notes.
yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that
Well,
works.
actually no, it's in the controls catalog. Like, the controls catalog might be a little bit easier to read.
So the spreadsheet is in. Okay, so
Yeah, this is the mapping where Marina tried to look at what tools and things kind of adjust these things that we describe in there. But if you, in the actual document, like the second link I posted is the controls catalog from the CNCF.
Hold on. So I wrote, I'm trying to copy and paste it here. This is what you're referring to?
I'm muted. So for the most part, it's under anything. If you scroll down, SCP is kind of the stuff that's mostly focused around supply chain security.
Okay,
Yeah.
got it. Okay. Is
And that
this,
also has a NIST 853 mapping as well.
I saw that, yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna assume that this is public because it's from the CNCF.
Oh yeah. This is all public, and I believe it's already 1.0.
Okay, yeah, I see the 1.0 on there. Okay. I just wanted to double check that this wasn't a work-related item that
Yeah.
shouldn't be in the public.
No.
Just double checking.
Yeah. These are all things that are underneath the CNCF.
Okay, awesome. Well, both of those are in the meeting notes. Anything else, folks? No? Okay. Well, if there's nothing else, feel free to drop. You have 9 minutes back to your day. I'm probably going to stick around and try to wrap up some of the action items on my side for like OpenSSF meeting calendar invite and things like that.
Thanks for driving this, Mel, but this is awesome.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks everyone for joining. Have a good day.
Thank you.